Okay, hi class 3313. I was ready to go home. It's like 6 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd been grading all day, and so I said, let me sit down and read your status of the class. And I have a complete freak out because, well, you address many things, which I really do appreciate, all of your comments. But one thing I realized off the bat, that you all were very, very, very uncomfortable with lesson planning, which I realized is probably one of the first classes that you do lesson planning in. And so, number one, don't feel like I'm going to grade very strictly. This is kind of just a basic lesson plan. But I do want to go through basic lesson planning to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, another frustration that you had is that the changing due dates, which I kind of had to laugh because, number one, we're trying to adjust to this class. Used to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long each week. And because of the amount of time you spend in field experience, we cut the class back, as we were required to do, down to 90 minutes each week, which really did limit class time. So all of us teachers who are teaching this class this semester are really having to deal with, well, how do we get 2 hours and 40 minutes worth of content into 90 minutes, which has been a major challenge. And plus, even today, I mean, we really only had a 40-minute class because of other things going on, which again, I'll apologize for that. So, think due dates have been changing because of that. And actually, our class is one of the ones closest to the rubric. Our course calendar, other classes are 2 to 3 weeks behind. So, good job for you all for catching up. And hopefully you do have Syllabus 2.0 in the course calendar, and that's helped quite a bit. But because of your major confusion with lesson planning, I'm going to change another due date. Your lesson plan, which I know you guys are probably madly working on right now. I'm going to give you a few extra days. I'll probably have it due on, let's say, Sunday night, in case you go through this video and you figure out that there are some things that you didn't do correctly and you want to correct them. That's fine with me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about lesson planning. Number one, there are 2 different ways to look at lesson planning. A lot of times your instructors, people you're observing, what they're doing is they're handed a textbook. They're teaching biology. They're handed the biology textbook. They're told to get through the biology standards in 1 year. And so they divide up the standards and they teach, point A, point B, point C. But there are other different ways that you can do. And one of the ways is backwards design. We talked a little bit about this like the second week of class. And this is where you actually start with, what do I want my students to know? What do I want them to be able to do? Who do I want them to be when they leave my class? So again, I'm a social studies person, so I'm going to give social studies examples, although I try to mix a few others in. But one of the big things in social studies is citizens. How am I going to make sure that my students know what citizenship is and what it means to be a citizen? So one thing I think about in my course is building in choice. And so they know how to make informed decisions. And that's really important to me as a social studies teacher. So instead of telling students what to do all the time, I say, here are your choices. You get to choose between 4 or 5 different things. That's something that I can do in my lessons. So I start with a broad goal. And I think, okay, we're learning about citizenship always, but we need to learn about, say, World War II. And so within World War II, I might, design a project, design an assessment where students are able to give choice, but there's also under that, there are activities, things I want to teach within that, so students can walk away with my broad goal and the specific learning objectives connected to that goal. So there's 2 different ways to look at this. And again, for this lesson plan, I know many of you will start with a topic that you like, maybe related to a course that you're taking right now, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, or you might do something related to your middle school experience that you're doing currently. So think about that and then maybe start with the lesson plan template. Okay, so I shortened this one quite a bit. This is the exact same thing, but I kind of took out the 5 E's, which I'll talk about here in the middle when it comes to instructional procedures. But lesson plan template, title of the lesson, you can title it whatever you want. Target audience, national standards, Oklahoma standards. What are your objectives for the lesson again? What do you want students to know, learn, be, do, all those great things? Think about the multiple intelligences that you will engage throughout your lesson. Then you write your procedures, which again, I call the hard part basically. How are you going to assess the lesson? And then what did you use to create the lesson? So I'm going to talk about that in great detail. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to go back to my example that I gave you, so follow along with my sample lesson plan. My title of my lesson was the Incas. How did I come up with this? Basically, I probably actually started with the topic first. I actually like teaching this topic. I came up with an idea for a hands-on lesson for it. And then I had to go to the standards to figure out where it fit. Again, I'm an old school world history teacher, and this used to be something that we taught in world history in high school, but now we don't teach it because they don't do ancient history anymore. They start with the Renaissance and move forward. So maybe you're teaching about, radical numbers or something like that. And so think about where that fits in the standards. Again, this first lesson plan is middle school. So you might want to first go to the Oklahoma standards and figure out, does my lesson match what's going to be taught in middle school content? Think about your target audience. So again, because of the standards, this fits in 6th grade world geography, because they study the Western Hemisphere. So they'll study North and South America, and they'll study the ancient cultures connected to the geography, which is where the Incas come in. Okay, so the next thing on yours is coming up with the national standards. On your syllabus, we gave you a list of where the national standards came from that apply to each of your content areas. So here's that list, but I'm going to give you a more detailed list here, and hopefully I've covered all the content areas in our class. So if you're a science person, you're looking at the Next Generation Science Standards. I gave you the link here, and again, if you're watching it on YouTube, then you probably want to go back to the actual PowerPoint and pull up, and so you can link to this. Foreign language, again, I've pulled the direct link here. Social studies, the same link. You have 10 themes of social studies. Math, these are the math standards, and again, kind of even vague for math and language arts, and even for social studies, where you might just looking at number concepts or addition, subtraction, those types of things. So your national standards are going to be broad. These are our broad goals for teaching this content area. When you get down to national standards, and here are the ones that I used for my lesson, I connected the national standards to my lesson. I don't necessarily require this, so you could just list those national standards. Okay, but I told you how they apply, and this is something that when you get to your methods class, the next big class you take, they make you tell me how the national standards apply. When you get down to very specifics on what am I supposed to teach, this is where you look for your Oklahoma academic standards. So I've given you the link here. Oklahoma academic standards are brand new. For social studies is the first content area to do them. They came into existence with the 2012-2013 school year. So that's the first time that they used them. A lot of content areas, science, foreign language, art, still use the old standards, which are called PASS standards, which stands for Priority Academic Student Skills. So if you go to this website, it'll actually list all the Oklahoma standards, and you can click on your content area. Some of them will say, here are the new academic standards, and then they won't have a link to them because they're still being revised, which would be these areas here. Okay, so most of these, and I put for social studies, but pretty much every area, is divided by grade. And that's usually divided by grade through middle school, because usually, all 6th grade curriculum, all 7th grade curriculum in the state looks the same. When you get to high school, when you give you choice, then you start picking and choosing the courses that you might want to take. And then different school districts will offer courses at different time. So, some kids take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, while some kids take Algebra 1 in 9th grade. So these are some of the differences. Okay? Then within social studies standards, and this is also true for English, probably foreign language maybe, but probably not yet because they haven't switched to the Oklahoma academic standards. The Oklahoma academic standards are made to meet Common Core. So they have process and literacy standards, what we call PALs, with them. And these are basically like literacy standards. This is how you want to make sure that you are reading and writing within each content area. For math, I don't think they're going to have process and literacy standards, although some math classrooms really are pushing writing and math to broaden students' understanding. Most of your academic standards, your Oklahoma academic standards, will be available in PDF documents. So again, I'd say look for the middle level grades, the courses, and then browse through or search for your specific topic. So again, in social studies, if you want to teach about World War I, it's not going to be in the middle school standards unless, again, you're looking at it through geography. So maybe you're looking at the geography of Europe, and you might want to briefly touch on the war for middle school, but that's more of a high school topic. I have students right now doing projects about the Holocaust. Holocaust is taught a lot in the 7th grade because they do Eastern Hemisphere geography, but they wanted to tackle it in the 9th grade, in the 8th grade, because it's not really connected to U.S. history in the 8th grade, but maybe the 8th grade language arts teacher is doing something, so you might make a connection there. So there are many different ways to, I guess, approach your topic. So look at your Oklahoma academic standards. So again, here are the ones that I chose for my lesson. My students are conducting a short research project, so that's why I chose the PALS. And then the way that the letters are listed, so it would be like Process and Linear Standard 2, and then under 2 there might be A, B, and C, so this is B, and then under A, B, and C there could be a 1 through 10 or whatever, so this is 0.6. That's how that's written out, so don't get tripped up by that. I suggest that you just copy and paste. And this is, again, just getting you to think about teaching via the standards. Okay, and then I have chosen here the content standards that I use with my lesson. Okay, so the next thing you have to do is writing objectives. So I'm going back to, I think it's like week 5 PowerPoint about writing objectives. Remember your ABCs of objectives: audience, behavior, condition, degree. So your audience is usually the students. The students will do what? What's the behavior? Students will be able to list and think about your Bloom's words again. What are the behaviors that you want your students to do? So they'll be able to list 5, I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember my sentence. How many states of matter are there? I can't remember. 2 or 3 states of matter. I can't remember. It's kind of sad. 5 presidents, whatever you're going to do. Condition, how are they going to do that? Are they going to do it on a test? Are they going to do it orally? And then degree, how much? What is the accuracy you want? Or you want them to be able to do this within 10 minutes and within 15 minutes. Okay, so go back and look at your ABCDs of objectives. That's just one way to write objectives. Remember, your objectives are very important. What do you want students to walk away with from this lesson? And we also take these objectives and we paste them right down with assessments, and we check to make sure that our lesson met our objectives. Sometimes I write my lesson procedures and then write my objectives. So don't feel like you have to start at the beginning and end at the end. Again, there are many different ways to write a lesson plan. So again, we ask you to write 3 overt, which will be your learning objectives, things that you can actually measure. So my learning objectives were my vocabularies, to be able to identify and define them. I'm going to be able to name the first Incan emperor after the lesson, and identify a quipu and describe its purpose. And by doing this in-class project or in-class research project. And then your behavioral objectives are what I like to call your touchy-feely objectives. What are students going to be able to learn about themselves and the world around them? Are they going to learn to work with others? Are they going to learn to complete a task? Are they going to give a speech in class? Those types of things. Things that I can't necessarily measure as a learning objective, as a cognitive objective, but they are affective objectives, where we have to do with actions and feelings and those types of things. Okay. Next thing, we ask you to list at least 3 multiple intelligences that your lesson hit. Okay. So again, you might be writing your procedures and then going back and looking at the multiple intelligences. Think about in my specific social studies lesson plan that I use for my methods courses, multiple intelligences fall at the bottom of the lesson plan. So here are the 8 ways of being smart. Remember, there are 9, and some people say 10 ways. So if you want to use existential, I have no problem with that. Okay. And then the procedures, which I consider to be the hard part. How am I going to build my lesson? Remember to be as detailed as possible, and also think about what you're doing and what the students are doing. Now, the lesson plan template that we're using now uses the 5 E's: engagement, exploration, explanation, elaboration, and evaluation. So you can see here what each part. Engagement is usually your lesson hook. Your exploration could be something, a hands-on activity. Explanation is where you explain that activity. Elaboration usually is a further deepening into the skills or concept that your lesson is. And then evaluation, how are you going to assess the student's knowledge? Okay, so for your teacher-led, teacher-centered lesson plan, deductive lesson plan, your engagement is usually your lesson opener. What am I going to do to hook the student? So remember, I began my mini lesson last week with a video. So that's what I use to hook the students, come up with their attention or grab their attention. I ask them specific questions about the video. Often in a teacher-led lesson plan or the deductive lesson plan that you're doing now, your explanation might be flipped with your exploration. So I want you to think about that, and it's okay if you move these around. A lot of times, even, which I consider even a good lesson plan, the explanation, elaboration, exploration are all kind of cut and pasted together. So I might have a concept and then we do something hands-on. I go back and teach and we do something hands-on. So this might be true in a longer lesson plan. That was my phone just rang. I had to hang up on my friend. I'll call her back in a minute. Okay. So your explanation, what are you going to teach? How are you going to teach it? And also within your explanation of procedures, again, just be as detailed as you can. What are you doing, the teacher? What are you doing? And then what are students doing? So I, the teacher, will share this information. I will list these concepts. The students will write them down, will draw on their vocabulary sheet. They will work, they will do think, pair, share with their students. I may ask a question as the teacher. I suspect students may have this answer. I suspect students may misunderstand this concept, and then this is how I'm going to teach or reteach it. So again, just be as detailed as you can. Your exploration is usually something hands-on linked to the lesson that helps students further explore the concepts of your lesson. So remember mine, I have my little research project. I would explain the kipu, we'd make a kipu, and then I'd lead them into the elaboration, which was the in-class assignment where you'd have to do the little research project that went with the lesson. The elaboration is usually student-led or independent practice, which is usually homework, but sometimes it can be something in class. And then the evaluation. How do you know students learned anything in your lesson? Did you even meet the objectives? How are you measuring what students learned? Again, take those lesson objectives, paste them down where it says evaluation or assessment, and then go and explain how you assess the lesson. Remember, our assessments are formative and summative. Formative are informal. I'm asking students if they understand, flash me the hand sign, show me with a 1, 2, or 3, those types of things that we talked about in class. They could be quizzes at the beginning, middle, end of class. They could be questions that I asked, or it could be homework. Summative or more formal, they're usually after a chapter, after a unit, at the end of instructions, or tests, projects, portfolios, those types of things. I really like this little drawing. I found it online. So they usually have all these formative assessments, and then we have the summative assessments top off to make sure students are where they're supposed to be. Okay, and then the last thing is basically your end matter. What resources did you use? Web links, videos? Did you use a textbook? So basically give me a citation, any materials that you needed for the lesson, those types of things. So you want to make sure that all that stuff is listed at the end. Okay? Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, even late. I don't know how late I'll be up tonight. Call me on my cell phone. I have no problem answering cell phone questions. Come on, guys, you really got to speak up, because I didn't need to know like today that you didn't know how to do a lesson plan. Alrighty, I will see you guys next week. I'm sure your lesson plans will be great, and I will be looking at them, and hopefully you'll have your grades before we come to class next week.